Hello and welcome to the Weekly Stuff Podcast with Jonathan Lack
and Sean Chapman.
We are here as always to talk about stuff. This week on the show, we are a couple days late.
Yeah.
Just because my little brother, Thomas, who you have heard on this podcast as recently as a couple weeks ago,
yes,
who was on to talk about Zelda and stuff, he just graduated college. And so that's actually why we were late 2 weeks in a row, was because he's a musician, so he had his senior recital, then he had his graduation last weekend, we had family in town, and it wasn't so much that I couldn't get I couldn't get away to do the podcast. I just don't think I was in the headspace to do it.
Right, sure.
Like, I would have shown up exhausted and, thinking of, I would have had Pomp and Circumstance running in my head.
I mean, we could have just done our Pomp and Circumstance retrospective podcast that we've been thinking about doing for years now.
Yeah, we could have talked about the thing in Fantasia 2000 where they use it for a story of Noah with Donald Duck.
Sure.
Which is, someone got high to come up with that.
Yes, I must admit, I've never seen Fantasia 2000.
Okay, that's okay. It's not required viewing.
Okay, good.
All right. But what is required viewing is the stuff we're talking about today.
Yes.
Because we are going to do our big Twin Peaks retrospective episode. We've wanted to do this forever.
Yeah. I feel like it is something we have talked about for literally years at this point doing.
We have, and this is like the last time we can do it, because on Sunday, May 21st, 18 hours of freshly squeezed Twin Peaks is coming to Showtime, directed by David Lynch, written by him and Mark Frost, and it's exciting.
It's extremely exciting, yeah.
Yeah, and we know nothing about it, which is the best thing.
Yes, which is exactly how it should be. And I feel like I hope that on the other side of these 18 episodes, we still know nothing about it.
That is kind of peak David Lynch, if that's the case. Yes. No, I am excited. He has not directed anything for film since 2006 with his film Inland Empire. And, it's very exciting, and Twin Peaks is great. So we get to talk about that, talk about David Lynch in general. He is one of my two favorite American directors of all time, and I did fucking research. I got a book here, I got ebooks here, I got notes. It's great. I get to do, I went into film school mode again.
Right, yeah.
It was fun. So, but we also get to talk about this week's Doctor Who.
Yes, which is a great episode of Doctor
Who. Great episode of Doctor Who. I think we may have thrown around the word great a little bit before. I would say, the first 4 episodes of this season were varying degrees of very, very good.
Yeah, sure.
I thought Oxygen was a great episode of Doctor Who.
Yeah, I agree.
A-grade classic kind of thing.
Yes, it is another in a long line of very great episodes from Jamie Matheson. That's he's so good.
He's the breakout writer of the Capaldi era, no doubt about it. Because he's written 4 or 5 episodes, and they've all been great. So, I hope Chris Chibnall knows he's really good and brings him on for future seasons.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah, because, as we've talked about before, Stephen Moffat has just built a great team of writers for the past few seasons, but he's the guy who kind of sticks out, and Oxygen it does some things.
Yeah, no,
it goes some places for Doctor Who.
It is on one hand a very typical episode of Doctor Who, and then on the other hand it is very much not. And that's, I think, why I love it so much.
Yeah, exactly. So we will get to talk about all of that. First, some stuff.
Yes.
What have you been up to, Sean?
Not a whole lot. I've been continuing a little bit of my Dragon Quest adventure. I think I'm kind of at the point where I'm going to slow down and move on to other stuff, but I'm pretty deep into Dragon Quest 3, which is, last time on the podcast we talked a little bit about Final Fantasy 1 and how that was so different than the way that franchise developed and stuff like that. And Dragon Quest 3 is obviously it's Dragon Quest, but it is also if Final Fantasy II had been the Final Fantasy II in my heart of hearts I always wanted, that took the concepts of Final Fantasy I and just fucking ran with them. Because Dragon Quest 3 is full on, you have your main hero character, that's your hero character, but other than that, you construct a party of 3 other adventurers with you that you just get to pick their names and their class and their personality stuff that sort of alters how their stats develop, and it's 100% you make your party, you go on this adventure, and it's very much that kind of RPG that a huge amount of it is sort of like asking you, the player, to sort of fill in the gaps in your head of who these party members are, what their like personalities are like, how they develop over the journey. And that's the stuff that I loved about Final Fantasy 1, is it giving you that space to really put your own imagination into the game and into the story. And Dragon Quest 3 does that 100%, and it's really fucking awesome.
Nice.
Yeah, so I've been having a lot of fun with that. The other thing I have been doing, have been finished with for a couple of days now, and it's like really sort of like been sitting with me in a really heavy way, is I finished that Romance of the Three Kingdoms TV show I've been talking about on and off here. Because finishing Persona 5 gave me space to be like, okay, now I can focus on finishing this. And I can say pretty confidently, now that I'm done with it, that is like easily one of the best TV shows I've ever seen.
Nice.
Like it's really unbelievable how perfectly it captures so much of what that book is, especially considering like how complicated Romance of the Three Kingdoms is from a storytelling point of view. There's so many layers of different sort of like small stories to bigger stories to bigger stories to bigger stories to like the massive overarching story of Romance of the Three Kingdoms. And that narrative structure is insanely complex, and finding a way to adapt that into a TV show and keep all of that charm, and then obviously inject a lot of other charm into it through the incredible performances, through the incredible editing and cinematography, and the music is fantastic. And it's something that if you have any interest in that kind of subject matter and you can find a way to watch this TV show, I think it is, or if you have read the book, absolutely is mandatory viewing. Like it is so good. The way that they adapt the material also helps sort of, I think, you look at the material in a slightly different way and kind of think like, oh, right, yeah, like that is one way you can think about this character or like this dynamic or this scene, because obviously now you're getting this sort of, authored sort of perspective on it that is different from the book, that you get to look at and be like, okay, yeah, I can see this character dynamic being sort of played this way or read that way. And every time they sort of approach that material, I think they always find a really interesting direction to come at it from that is a different sort of perspective than just like what the bare novel has, but also feels very true to what the real story is, which is something that a lot of the other movie adaptations or other like adaptations of the book kind of get away from that side of it, because they try to modernize it or like sort of like sweep some of like the weirder sort of fantastical stuff in the book under the rug and ignore it. And here it's just like, no, we're taking all that. We're like not just cutting something out because it's weird. We're not cutting something out because it's like super old. We're just going to fucking, like if Liu Bei is going to throw his kid in this scene and it's like kind of a weird scene in the book, but it makes sense when you're in the headspace of the book, we're just going to do it. It looks fucking crazy on TV, but we're going to do it because it's something that like that scene needs, and you need to have it there. And you just have like the confidence in the viewer to like be on that journey with you and say like, yes, we're going all the fucking way with this book, and it's fantastic.
Two things.
Okay.
One, I love just how far outside the contemporary zeitgeist your interests are at the moment.
Yes.
It's great.
I feel like I'm in that space a lot.
It's okay.
Especially more now so these days.
No, it's great.
Yeah.
I guarantee you no one else is talking about that on a podcast right now.
Yes, you are probably right.
And I love that. Second, it just makes me think like, we are pretty, I think, well-versed in, like, we as a culture of, like, the live-action TV of English-speaking countries,
Yeah.
America, and then some Canada, some Britain, some Australia, some New Zealand. But, like, outside of that, I feel like non-English language live-action TV does not come... We don't talk about it as much, and there's probably a whole world of great TV out there.
Yeah.
And it's cool to, like, you got to experience this because you kind of searched it out.
Yeah.
And it sounds awesome, and that's cool. Was that a mainland Chinese production or Hong Kong?
It was mainland Chinese,
okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, so that's neat. Now, see, you're talking about so much, I really want to read and watch this thing, too.
It's just so good. This is like, if you do, then we can add that to the podcast list of ridiculous niche topics that we bring up every now and then that nobody listening to this podcast has any idea what it is.
No, it's good. It's fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, but like, and then one other thing I just want to say about it, because it's one of the reasons why it's been sitting with me very hard, is, the Romance of the Three Kingdoms as a story exists in a lot of, like, it sort of treads in a lot of different genres and modes because it's so long and has so many characters. And so a lot of times it's like, there are parts of it that feel like, oh, this is kind of like a cool spy story. This is like this big political story. This is like this big military story. But then also there's a huge phase of that book, and then obviously of the TV show as well, that it is a tragedy because of the main characters, the main group of characters you sort of come to really care about over the course of it, they all die, and most of them die very tragic deaths. And when you get into that last, like, 20 to 30 episodes of the TV show, it is so fucking brutal. It was so hard to watch that, because, like, just knowing...
Because you'd have a different connection with them on screen than you would in a book, you know?
Exactly, because you have particularly, like, the big one is Zhuge Liang, who's this character who... He's sort of, like, one of, like, the first, like, kind of prototypical genius Sherlock Holmes-esque. Obviously, he's not a detective, but, like, that kind of, like... sees things that other people can't see because he's so smart, and it's sort of like he's always the smartest guy in the room. He's that kind of character, and he is introduced into the story like in terms of the TV show, like 20 episodes in. So he's not from the very beginning. That also means he's like 15 to 20 years younger than the people he joins, the Liu Bei group, which are kind of like the quote-unquote the good guys. And so that means since he's the youngest one, he's the last one left of the original group, and you have this long stretch of episodes where he's the only guy left from like the beginning of the story that you really care about, and he's slowly trudging on, sort of like fighting this war that you know he's not going to be able to win. And it's like maybe the most brutal 5 to 6 episodes of TV I've ever seen, where you just know he can't win, but you like the way the story is designed. It's like every step of the way you're like, no, he should this time he can do it. Like in your heart of hearts, you're like, this time somehow he's just going to get through, even though you know it's a fucking TV show. It's a story that's been written for hundreds of years. It's that kind of tragedy where it's like, it feels like it's so close, and you so want him to be able to like unify China and like restore the Han Dynasty and be like, yeah, motherfucker, we fucking did it. Like you did everything that Liu Bei left you to do and like completed the great cause. And of course he just dies at the end, just like, fucking no, god damn it, god damn it. I wanted, god damn it, Zhuge. Especially because his performance is the best performance. Like his actor is so unbelievably good. It's just like, it was so hard to watch the episode when he dies.
It's like when you get a particularly good, like, Shakespeare movie or something.
Yeah.
And you forget for a little bit that you've known this story your whole life.
Yeah, and, like, you have that moment when you get near the end, you're like, oh, fuck, everybody dies. Oh, fuck, no, not this time, come on.
Right, yeah. All right, well, cool. Speaking of, oh, no, everyone dies, I saw the black and white cut of Logan last night.
Right.
They did Logan Noir, they're calling it. They did a special screening through the Draft House theaters where they had the movie, and after the film they had a live stream Q&A with Hugh Jackman, James Mangold, and one of the producers from the film out of like a Brooklyn Draft House, but they live streamed it in all the other theaters. So it was a really cool experience. My brother, Thomas, had not seen the movie yet, so I took him to see it, and I thought that was kind of a fun thing to like compare notes on of like, he never saw the color version, so
right.
Just see the black and white. And like Mad Max, Fury Road, the black and chrome thing, it's a really cool experience. And my number one reaction to it, almost from the beginning, was as bleak as Logan is in its original theatrical color version, it feels exponentially bleaker in black and white. And I don't think I realized it would until I started watching it.
Right.
But there is something about the themes of that story and the ideas of that story that when you drain the world quite literally of color, it feels that much darker. Because, the whole thing is about, Logan is this far removed from his time with the X-Men, and the mutants are almost all gone, and the world is a much harsher place. And when you have that, and then you take the color out, it's kind of overwhelming. Like, there were some scenes where, like, the big set piece on the farm in the middle of the movie, which is definitely the scene that benefits the most from the black and white of it, because there's all this kind of fog in some spots, and there's just kind of, they do the black and white where it's kind of very inky, and so there's just this overwhelming kind of darkness to it, and you're never sure if it's night or day, and you get into all of that, and that scene hurt a lot when I saw it the first time,
right.
Because a lot of people don't make it out of that scene. I was trying not to spoil anything.
Yeah.
In black and white, it's like, it was almost like I felt like I almost needed to like step out of the theater and like just take a breath. And I've never had that with a comic book movie.
Right.
That's crazy, and it just speaks to how good that movie is. But I do think like there's a real artistic reason to have that movie have an alternate black and white version, because it heightens, I think, the darkness kind of inherent in the story. And I don't know if I would say the movie is better in black and white, but there's something about it that feels truer to itself in black and white, if that makes sense.
Sure.
Like, James Mangold in the Q&A afterwards said something very candid that I thought was great, where someone said, oh, is this now your preferred version of the movie? And he said, well, I'd be lying if I said that, because I did make this as a color movie. All the people I worked with, my costume designer, my production designer, that would be really unfair to them to say, all your work making the colors didn't matter.
Right.
They said, no, this is a color movie because that's how I made it. If I'd shot it in black and white, I would have done things differently. And there's definitely, as in the Mad Max thing, there are some scenes where you're like, there's only so much you can do in post to make this black and white, because this was a film made for color.
Right.
But I still think like it's an extraordinary alternate version of the movie. The way it plays with the tone is so fascinating. And, I honestly, like on a second viewing, I felt the whole movie harder in weird ways. It really hit home. And same with my brother. In fact, we like, as the credits were playing, we both just like sat in silence for like 5 minutes listening to the Johnny Cash. And then finally I turned to him and said, well, what did you think? And he said, his first reaction, I think it's a good first reaction, was, man, Patrick Stewart was good in that.
Yeah.
Because it's true. And I think in black and white, there's also like his kind of climactic scene in the film, that the way that scene plays with shadow and light in black and white is fascinating. And anyway, just everyone's great in that movie, obviously. But it's really a cool alternate version. And the Blu-ray that's coming out next week, it's cool. It's just part of the Blu-ray. It's on there. You don't have to get like a special version of it. They're not double dipping later on down the road. I'm really I think that's a cool thing they did with that. So it's going to be on there in both versions. And I just, especially after second viewing, I think I would cement that with Spider-Man 2 and The Dark Knight as the best comic book movies ever made. I think those are probably my top 3 in the genre, just because I think each of those was either foundational or took that genre to places it had never gone before.
Right.
And Logan really takes it to places it's never gone before. Like, I watch it a second time and I walk out, I'm like, I can't believe that movie was made.
Yeah.
I can't believe they made a movie where those things happen. And also seeing it in black and white made me realize, if you were ever to do a proper film adaptation of the Cormac McCarthy book, The Road, which they did an okay version of with Viggo Mortensen. He's very good in that, but the rest of that movie is kind of meh. You would have to do that in black and white.
Sure.
There is no way I think you could do a proper adaptation of that book and have it be in color. And Logan, like seeing it in black and white, this particular kind of like apocalyptic setting was really cool. So, anyway.
Did they take the opportunity of being able to come back to the movie in post and change some stuff? Did they fix the one flaw with the movie, and that was not having the 90s X-Men cartoon theme song at the end? Which I think we both identified as like the one thing the movie was missing in our podcast.
They did not do that, but they did at the beginning. They used the old Fox logo from like 1977 Star Wars.
Okay.
Which was cool.
Okay.
And then they did a big like Inglorious CinemaScope thing at the beginning too. And I thought that was a fun little touch.
Nice.
Because this does feel more like a movie that would get made in like the 70s, not in the 2010s.
Yeah, exactly. It does feel like 70s Hollywood way more than it does 2010s Hollywood.
Yeah, like, like there's a reason David Lynch doesn't make movies anymore.
Yeah. Just
to talk about someone we're going to be talking about on the podcast, later. And that's because the era he came up in just is gone, and Logan does in some ways feel like a bygone era where what was mainstream was so much more adult.
Yeah.
And not to say I don't love, the sillier stuff. I also saw Guardians of the Galaxy 2 a second time because my brother hadn't seen that. And I loved that even more a second time. I just think that's a great Marvel movie.
Yeah.
But Logan is a fucking thing, especially in black and white.
Awesome.
Yeah. So anyway, that's all the stuff. Let's do a couple pieces of news, Sean.
Okay.
I'm going to go with the simpler one first. Shin Godzilla.
Yes.
One of our favorite movies from last year.
Absolutely.
It's coming to Blu-ray from Funimation on August 1st. Just wanted to note that because you and I have both been like kind of watering at the mouth of like, when do we get a Blu-ray of that?
Yeah, I really want to watch that movie again.
Yeah, and it's like it came out on Blu-ray in Japan recently, I think. But I don't think it has like the subtitles and stuff.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, Funimation will have it. It's a combo pack, Blu-ray, DVD, digital copy, so you can watch it in 7 different ways if you want.
I mean, that's how I like to watch my movies. All the different ways you can watch it all at the same time.
Yeah.
It's the only way to experience it the way it was intended.
Yep. So that's awesome that they're putting it out. I'm sure it'll look great. The one interesting thing I saw in the press release is they will have English dubbed audio on the film, which, like, taken in a vacuum is not completely surprising because when these companies put out these movies in the U.S., oftentimes you will do some kind of dub on the home release just because some people won't buy it without that. And it's easy. Funimation makes dubs. It's easy for them to do.
Yeah, especially with, like, most other Godzilla movies are also, like, movies that kids will like. And obviously a kid is not going to want to watch that movie in Japanese with English subtitles.
Yeah. That said, I think you and I both, when we talked about it in its theatrical release, were like, we just like as a point of thought, we were like, how the hell would you dub that movie? And I still have that question.
I mean, you'd have to either like get like 12 actors that can do 100 different voices, or like Funimation has to call in everybody who has ever done any voice acting for them at any point in their history, because there are so many small speaking roles in Shin Godzilla, because it's just, you know, it's a movie that definitely has a handful of main characters. It also has this huge cast of like every single like technical member of the Japanese government. I feel like shows up in that movie at one point or the other and says a line or two. You know,
it has this like Italian neo-realist thing to it, where it's about the community, not the characters.
Yeah.
And you would have to have so many different voices. The other thing is the dialogue moves so fast, and in Japanese, you can get more meaning into fewer words.
Yeah.
And so then it's just, because some of those subtitles, they'll say a couple of things, but it's so highly technical, the subtitles will be like 4 lines long. I don't know how you dub that.
Yeah.
And kudos to them for trying. I will absolutely listen to like 15 minutes of that just out of curiosity. But that's kind of hilarious that they're trying.
I am so excited to see that movie again. And I always really enjoy when DVDs, like, even if it's not how I'm going to ever watch the movie all the way through, I love that, like, don't just give me the English dub. I want, like, every single language that this has been dubbed into, put it onto every single DVD re-release, because I want to see all of it. I want to know what Darth Vader sounds like in Portuguese, you know?
Exactly. In fact, you know a great thing about that? When I recently rewatched Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me for our retrospective later, and that Blu-ray that's in the box set has all the other languages.
Yes, all of the Blu-rays on that for the entire series has, like, 30 different language options.
Yep, and I listened to some of it in Japanese.
Yes.
Gordon Cole in Japanese is the best piece of dubbing I think I've ever heard. I just have to say that.
Did you watch any of Twin Peaks in Japanese that had Sheriff Truman in it?
No.
Because his Japanese voice, I watched like some clips of the pilot in it with it, and it's like, his voice in Japanese is fucking nuts. It's so, like, super crazy deep in a way that you're like, that's not how this character sounds in English at all, but it's kind of amazing.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, having extra dubs on Blu-rays is fun.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that's fun. I have these Studio Ghibli Blu-rays, the ones from Japan. I have this whole collection of them. And one of the things that's so great is they made these as, like, definitive sets, so they had every dub they could legally get their hands on. And so, yeah, exactly as you're saying, if you want to hear Porco Rosso in Portuguese or something, it's on there, and it's fun to hear them.
It's always just really interesting to see, like, what different countries' takes are on these different characters and stuff like that.
So anyway, Shin Godzilla, Blu-ray, August 1st. Maybe we can talk about the movie again, because it's so good.
It's so good.
And I love the cover they put for it. Actually, all of Funimation's marketing for Shin Godzilla was really good.
Yeah.
Like, they had really sharp key art and stuff. So that's cool. Less cool, some news about Hitman.
Yeah.
One of our favorite games from last year. Your favorite game.
Favorite game of 2016.
And I was just playing some of it this morning. I was dicking around in it, killing time until the podcast. And anyway, Square Enix, which was the publisher of this game, EO Interactive was the developer.
Yeah.
They basically have gotten rid of EO. They're not part of Square Enix anymore. They revealed this in an earnings call.
Yeah.
Complex situation. There's still a lot we don't know, including who actually owns the rights to Hitman.
Yeah.
What EO's plans are in the future. Obviously, they probably don't know quite yet where they're going to go with it, if they're going to need another publisher or something. If Square Enix is trying to retain the rights and push it off to someone else. It's very strange. It raises a lot of questions about how Hitman 2016, that first season, did commercially, even though it was critically very well acclaimed. But what's your reaction to this, Sean?
Yeah, it's a bummer, first of all, just to, like, because, like, Hitman 2016 was not like an abject sales failure or anything like that, but it was not a huge breakout success. And Square Enix has a weird history, like, you know, there was a big kerfuffle in 2012 or 2013 whenever that first Tomb Raider game came out, of them on an earnings call basically saying that, oh yeah, this game was sort of a financial failure, even though it sold like 3 to 4 million copies. It's like, that's crazy that, like, that's your expectations for this Tomb Raider reboot were so high that, like, the multi-millions of copies it sold was not enough for you. So it's like Square Enix has had some weird history with that. But it's just a bummer to see, you know, that studio not get, like, hey, even if this didn't, you know, blow the world open with how well it sold, Like, it was this incredible critical success. It fostered this incredibly intense fan community, a lot of which of people like me that had never been into Hitman before, and take that and be like, this is a like really solid foundation that we can build off of, that like if you maintain that core base, like that is something that like that is a core base that will never betray you, you know?
Yeah.
That was like the kind of community that had built around that game, because they had been so smart in how they were updating it and adding like all the elusive targets and adding in all like the escalation contracts and obviously the new maps and everything, and like updating the game for like quality of life features as it went on. Like, they were so responsive to those sorts of issues and like really getting in there and fixing problems and adding cool new things to the game and being very sort of like interactive and hands-on with the community aspect of it. And then just to see Square Enix say like, but them, really sucks.
It really sucks, and it's too bad. You know, Square Enix is so big, and they publish so many things. You can see that if they're just like, we don't want to put the work into it, we're not going to lose anything from dumping these guys. You can get the corporate mentality, even if it's stupid. I do think, though, a good, not to say Square Enix isn't a good publisher, but a publisher committed to this project, I think, could make it so big.
Yeah.
Because EO's side of it, the creative side of it, is 100% there. It's 110% there. It is on point. You've got the fan community, all of that stuff. I do think if you had a publisher who could foster that and say, well, let's do season 2 and build on that audience, because we probably can't go down. You know, this has had so much hype. I think it added people throughout its life. Let's do a second season and get bigger. Frankly, it's like a cable TV model, where a lot of TV shows in their first season are not necessarily the biggest hits in the world, but oftentimes it would be a big mistake to just cancel those, because maybe you could build it into something big, a la something like, you know, Breaking Bad is a great example, where people forget that show was super low rated in its first couple seasons, but it kind of, you know, it went out to Netflix and they found new ways to kind of get the word out there, and by the end it had, you know, one of the highest viewing figures for its final season on all of cable TV. And I think, you know, video games are not perfectly analogous to that, but Hitman is something that I think, depending on what kind of resources you're putting into it, could have that kind of growth, especially because they're doing something with the episodic model that's pretty unprecedented.
Yeah.
You know, it's not the Telltale model. It's not just pieces of story that get doled out at sometimes very random intervals. It was, you know, pieces of, you know, open world content. And it was this, and it wasn't even just, you know, linear, like every month you have something new. It was this constant drip drop of like, here's an escalation contract, and here's a different way to play this level, and here's new weapons and stuff like that. And it really kept people on board. And I do think, especially if you know, split the seasons up, where someone could say, all right, I didn't play the first season, but I could jump in on the second, which obviously I think you could. Hitman is not that narratively in depth.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you didn't have to have the first season installed and you just, you know, really make it easy for people to jump on board at different points, I think a publisher could nurture that into a hit and maybe find that there's a business model out there. And maybe you have to adjust. Maybe they put too much money into the first season and you would have to maybe reduce the budget a little bit or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
But, like, I do think a committed publisher could make that something really successful.
Yeah, me too. And it is, like, important to note that, like, again, we don't know if this, like, it is. I would not go around, like, assuming that Hitman Season 2 is going to be a thing, but this does not mean that it's, like, completely dead, necessarily. Right. And, like, there have been rumors in places that, like, there has already been sort of like a deal in place behind the scenes that IO Interactive is going to continue on with a Hitman Season 2 that I really hope are true. Like, I feel like hopefully that is something that, if it is true, we'll hear about it around E3, hopefully. But yeah, like I would not say, like, just assume that there's going to be Hitman Season 2, but it's not completely hopeless right now.
Right. If they have the rights through some means or another,
yeah.
And I am sure if not Square Enix, there's got to be a publisher who would look at Season 1 and say, okay, maybe it didn't sell as well as they wanted, but that is something worth chasing.
Yeah.
I think there has to be someone out there who would pick that up and say, yeah, we can work with this.
Yeah, because, again, that game is just amazing in so many ways. And
yeah.
Like, I think there are so many other kinds of games that could learn a lot by Hitman, both in terms of some of its, like, game design approach, but then also its business model approach, that I hope, like, this does not scare people away from trying out some of the stuff that Hitman sort of, like, innovated on.
You know, they took a big risk on this.
Yeah.
And it paid off creatively. I think there probably were always going to be some bumps in the road trying this out, because it's just so different than any other game release. It's so, before you play it and see it, it does sound non-intuitive of like, oh, why would you have a Hitman episodic? And then you're like, oh, you need it that way. That's the best version of this thing. But yeah.
Yeah, because that was like exactly how I felt when I was playing Dishonored 2, was like, this game is good and I'm enjoying it, but like, man, if I like had the luxury of being able to go through these levels in a bunch of different ways, and they designed the game like so that they were like as replayable as Hitman was, I think I would have liked that game way more. It was like something where it's like, once I had that taste of that kind of big clockwork level sort of video game in that format that really sort of indulges what that kind of level design is good at, it's really hard to play a game that doesn't do that anymore.
Exactly. So yeah, hope we get more Hitman, and just good luck to everyone at that studio.
Yeah, I really hope this situation comes out okay for everyone at IO Interactive, because it's like, again, they made my favorite game from last year, and last year had a lot of really good video games in it.
Yeah, great year and great game. So one last piece of news.
Yeah.
A game I hope will be one of the best games of this year, Sonic Forces, which is essentially seemingly the sequel to Sonic Generations.
It's made by the same team, and it's got the two Sonics in it, so...
Well, they had said for a while there was going to be a third character, playable character, and we were like, is it Tails? Is it Knuckles? Is it Cream the Rabbit? I don't know. Probably not.
It's Big the Cat. Everyone knew. It was obviously
They're going to have a new fishing peripheral.
Yeah.
Mad Catz, before going out of business, had one last thing to build. And it was the no.
I mean, that's the VR mode of the game, is where you play as Big the Cat in Fish, yeah.
That would be the greatest piece of trolling they could pull. Is they for PS4 they have a VR mode, and it's Big the Cat fishing.
Yeah.
HD remakes of his levels from Sonic Adventure 1.
Absolutely.
No. But we got a trailer yesterday that revealed the third character is you!
It's me!
It's a custom-made hedgehog.
Or not just a hedgehog, it could be like a rabbit, it could be a wolf, it could be a bear. Like, they had a whole list. There's like 8 different animal species that you could use as your base to craft and sculpt your perfect fanficky kind of like me in Sonic the Hedgehog universe character.
Yep, and you get gadgets to use, and it looks actually, the gameplay of that character it reminded me a little bit of Sonic Heroes, where it's kind of, it's the fast platforming, but a little slowed down because you have more kind of to do with the levels and the enemies. It looks kind of cool. It looks awesome. It also looks stupid, and that's what I love about it.
Yes. We were talking a little bit before we started recording the podcast, and it is something that I feel like you see that trailer and you can't believe that they've never done that before. Because for people who don't know, like, Sonic the Hedgehog as a franchise has had such a rabid sort of fan art community for decades now, because there's something about that art style that really attracts people, and thinking about like, oh, like, what are these others, like the other sort of cool Sonic the Hedgehog characters that I could create and stuff like that. And it's weird. It's weird that they've never sort of like capitalized on that, because it is one of the sort of like most dedicated parts of the Sonic the Hedgehog community, really, is the fan artists.
Absolutely, and it feels so tonally in keeping with kind of the celebratory nature of the Sonic games this year.
Yeah.
It does feel kind of like the final missing piece. Like, we had Sonic Mania, and we knew about that. We had Sonic Forces, and we kind of knew the general thing, but it's like, what's the last piece you can put in there to make this kind of a perfect celebration of this franchise? And I wouldn't have thought of that, but that's kind of awesome, that's kind of the last piece. And it also makes it feel like, okay, this is not just Sonic Generations 2.0.
Yeah.
This is more than that, and that sounds fun.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see how that game turns out, because, again, Sonic Generations is a, like, criminally underrated video game that, like, people just like to say, you know, every Sonic the Hedgehog game has been kind of crap since around, like, the adventure games. It's not true. Sonic Generations was really fucking good. Also, a lot of the handheld games were good along the way.
Yes, and two of my most anticipated games of this year are Sonic games.
Yeah.
We have not gotten to say that in a really long time.
Yeah.
I mean, Sonic Generations was 2011. It was the year we graduated high school.
Yeah, that was a long time ago, where we were talking about that on like 2 iterations of podcasts ago, basically.
I know, and it's such a great game, and I'm just glad there's more good Sonic coming, and so different. Like, Sonic Mania looks so good to me. I'm so excited for that. But that is a completely different kind of game than Forces, and I'm so excited for both of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I even I managed, they put up the pre-orders for the Nintendo Switch, the Sonic Mania Collector's Edition.
Okay.
I threw a pre-order on that because it's really cool what they've done, where like you get the game digitally, but then it's all these like physical goodies of like they made like a fake Genesis cart for the game.
Nice.
And like a little statue of Sonic standing on top of a Genesis, and you can hit it and it makes sounds. I don't know. It looks kind of cool. I might or might not get it, but I like that they're going all out for these games.
You know, if there's like, there are only so many franchises in video games where you can just justify being like, you know what, fuck it. Like, yeah, we're going to, like, obviously it's a digital game, but, you know, people love Sonic the Hedgehog. We'll give them cool Sonic the Hedgehog merchandise.
Yeah, it's definitely a I want to, before that game comes out, I kind of want to go back and play all the Genesis games again, because it's been years since I did those. Probably when they came out on Xbox Live Arcade.
That's definitely the last time I played them.
Yeah, I've played parts of them, but sitting down and I'm going to beat Sonic the Hedgehog 2 or something. Yeah. It's been a long time. And luckily, those are the Sonic games on backwards compatibility on Xbox One.
Yes, or I feel like every single Sega Genesis game has been released on Steam at one point or another. So you can play those games, or you can play them on iPhones if you really want to. You can play those games on your toaster probably at some point.
Yeah, and emulators and stuff.
Yeah.
So, great games. Excited for Sonic. This looks cool. So that's the news.
Yep.
Let's talk about some Doctor Who.
Let's talk about Doctor the Who.
All right, spoilers from this point out for Oxygen. If you haven't seen this one, you don't want this one spoiled.
Yeah.
So 3, 2, 1. The Doctor went blind.
Yes. And that's the kind of thing that I feel like in most episodes when we do this, that would be the joke spoiler we say.
Yeah.
That is not the real spoiler for the episode. But no, he straight up, he goes blind.
I mean, let's talk about this. The Doctor went blind. Bill was exposed to the vacuum of space and then basically died and came back. Most of the side characters died gruesomely.
Yeah.
There was no, we get to save everyone at the end.
No.
This was a spectacularly dark episode of Doctor Who.
Oh, yes. Yeah, it is one of the darker ones. It's another one of, an episode that feels like it's a string of episodes this season that feel like it is pulling specifically from the 7th Doctor era kind of stuff, and how, weirdly dark that era could also get, and just being everybody did die, and also the Doctor kind of low-key committed genocide on the Cybermen, and we're not really going to try to unpack that this time around, but it's kind of fucked up here and there.
I mean, it's also the other trend I see in this season is every episode to varying degrees has felt like taking a really typical Doctor Who story that we just archetypally know, whether it's kind of the companion introduction, or we're going to go to the future, or we're going to go to the past, or, we're going to do a haunted house.
Yeah.
And then, doing a spin on it that you don't expect, either through just kind of the sheer quality of it, or because of the turns it takes. This is both of those, in that we have seen Doctor on a space station in trouble many times.
Yeah, that's you don't even need to take into account classic Doctor Who to say we've seen a dozen of those stories. Even just new Doctor Who has done it once per season almost at some point.
Oh, pretty much. And it's produced decent episodes, and it's produced episodes so forgettable I literally remember nothing about them, 42, the one from the third season with the 10th Doctor, and things like that. So they run the gauntlet, but this was a special one.
Yeah.
Because it pushed things.
Yes, yeah.
It pushed buttons. It was incredibly well written. For its characters, it was on point. And it felt again, in the evolution of Bill and the Doctor's relationship, Bill and the Doctor are friends, and the Doctor cares very much about Bill, and vice versa. But boy, is that a weird relationship because of where they've had to go over the course of these 5 episodes. Bill has been challenged more than most companions are in their first couple outings.
Yeah. And then also this episode to me felt like it was the first time the season has now had an episode that they're we're going to really kind of develop the Doctor side of this also. That's because he's been he's one of the main characters. He's been there and he's been evolving a little bit in terms of whatever the season's arc is through the other episodes. But this felt like the big one where they kind of tipped their hand all the way into being the Doctor's in a weird place because it's this is because physically maiming the Doctor in some way is something that has never really happened other than when the 10th Doctor got his hand cut off in his regeneration, or when his first episode, Christmas Invasion, and it comes back immediately because he was fresh off of regenerating. That's the closest thing I can think of to the Doctor being really physically harmed in a way that's not just him leading directly to him regenerating. It just kind of never happens. And here it feels like this really fascinating kind of continuation in some ways of some of the stuff they did in season 9, where it feels like Clara's arc from season 9 has almost kind of transferred onto the Doctor at this point of the getting really careless and becoming impatient and just rushing and pushing things and being desperate. But the audience doesn't fully understand exactly why he's desperate as he is. And obviously has stuff to do with, the Master who's behind the vault. I feel
it's the Master.
We fully know that at this point. And whatever situation has led to that, and him being cramped and stuck on Earth, and he's just so antsy and just wants to get out and run around or whatever and be free, and that's pushing him to do things and be dangerous in a way that taking risks that he normally wouldn't take, even on Doctor Who.
I mean, like, self-consciously, it's meta for him, because he goes to the space station and he's like, I've done 1 million space station adventures, we'll be fine. And very quickly, no one's fine.
Yeah.
And, like, Nardole is the voice of reason in this whole episode. And it's like, I think it was really well paced not having Nardole on adventures for a couple of weeks, because his presence here is really felt because of all that. But, so it was one of the things I wanted to say is that, this is an episode that really critically interrogates the Doctor. It has very real consequences, and it moves that arc along so beautifully. It speaks to how good a writer Jamie Matheson is, and probably how much Stephen Moffat trusts him, that this is almost the kind of episode you'd expect Moffat himself to take, because the consequences are so big. But it's not. Jamie Matheson is an, quote-unquote outside writer writing for the show, and, comes in and gets to do this. And it's, sometimes writers who, kind of do one per season or something don't get to come in and do a big defining episode for the run. He got to do it last season with the girl who died. Woman who lived. There we go.
Yes.
Confusing. Girl who died, and gets to do it again here, and just very good at it. It's a very good standalone Doctor Who story, but then it's so much beyond that, too.
Yeah. And one of the things I found really fascinating was I watched the post-show interview stuff that they do on their YouTube channel, and they had Jamie Matheson on it, and he said in there something like, I was really surprised that he was the one who originally wrote into the episode that the Doctor is blinded over the course of it, which is something that I assumed Moffat said, asked him, hey, I want this to be a thing that happens in this episode. But no, he put that into one of his original drafts for the episode, assuming that Moffat or someone would say, you can't do this is going way too far, you crazy person. And instead Moffat was like, this is amazing, don't fix it at the end, make it so he's still blind, and I'm going to write the next episode. And that's I think that's awesome. Really awesome. It's a really great story of how, that kind of the writers, room sort of stuff works, or the way the writers sort of bounce off of each other, and Stephen Moffat having enough faith in someone like Jamie Matheson to sort of take that story point from him and run with it,
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I can't even imagine that, it takes some balls to just write a script where, I'm going to blind the Doctor.
Yeah.
Children's hero of 50 years of British television. Let's do this thing.
But then, writing in the fix at the end, because the original version of the script, when he gets it repaired in the TARDIS, it actually gets repaired in the TARDIS. Yeah. And then the head writer of the show is like, no, keep him blind. You're like, what the fuck are you talking about, Stephen?
I do get this feeling that we're going to see some really crazy shit in the back half of this season.
Yeah.
Because I feel like Stephen Moffat and, to an extent, Peter Capaldi on their way out the door don't give a fuck. Uh-huh. It's like, yeah, we can do whatever we want. There's no consequences. Let's just go crazy with it. I think you got a lot of that in Series 9, and I feel like you're getting that here, or we're feeling that build. Because I definitely felt that last week in Knock Knock of they're going places with this. You normally wouldn't do this. And, this episode goes even further. And I think we're also back fully into the mode of, let's just challenge Peter Capaldi as much as we can.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing he can't do, apparently.
Uh-huh.
Let's just make him blind for half an episode and see if he can play that. And he plays it.
Yep.
And, it gives him an excuse in future episodes to wear the sunglasses more, which is great.
Yeah, it's a good... It's such an incredibly synergistic sort of decision to have, just been born from a weird choice that one of the writers made.
I know. So, all right, let's get into this episode a little more. I mean... So it starts with that pre-credits scene, which is very creepy and sad, of this couple talking about we're going to have a baby, and then one of them dies.
Yeah. Also, it highlights again something this season has done very well is the production value side of things. I think all the stuff on the space station looks really good, and they have a lot more footage of them in spacewalks and stuff that look very good. That I feel like normally in this kind of episode of Doctor Who you wouldn't show that much because it's just technically more difficult to sort of get across.
Yeah, no, they again, we joked that the first episode of this series looked kind of low budget.
Yeah.
They must have saved a lot of money off that episode, or there's a 3-part TARDIS bottle episode coming, because these episodes have looked expensive.
Yeah.
No, but you're right, and then there's a specific scare they do in that pre-credit scene that I don't think I've ever seen done in this way in sci-fi, which is using the idea, other sci-fi has used the idea that there's no sound in space, but the way this one does it, where they're talking to each other, and then the guy kind of has his back turned, he's working on the thing, and the woman stops talking for a minute, and you see the the suits come up and kill her, and the guy has no idea, because he wouldn't. There's no sound behind him. That's kind of an amazing little sequence in terms of this is scary.
Yeah, the lack of sensory perception you have in space. Yeah, it's a very good use of that. And like the way they film it, where it's like very loud and chaotic when it's from her perspective, and then it cuts to him and it's like completely silent. It's very well done.
It feels like something you'd see in like, a Ridley Scott alien movie.
Yeah.
Maybe an old one.
I mean, a lot of this is like super alien. Like it's so like they're being monsters, but the real monster is capitalism in space. Like that's alien as fuck, and I love it.
Yeah, no, I love that. So anyway, but that's our pre-credits scene, and it's important because the first couple minutes of this episode are actually really light and fun before you get into space, and then it's like, but you always have that in the back of your mind of like, well, they wouldn't have shown us that if the Doctor wasn't going there.
Yeah.
And so, you have that initial scene with the Doctor and Bill on the TARDIS, and there's just some fun stuff, and Nardole kind of cajoling them and stuff, and he wants to come along because the Doctor is being very irresponsible, and then they get there, and immediately shit goes to hell.
Yeah, it is just it is definitely a like you don't get the normal like, oh, we land in this area and walk around for a little bit and look at this stuff and maybe like encounter one of the side characters and then shit just starts going wrong. It's like you land and it's immediately, oh fuck, like there's no oxygen here. This like
they're trying to take our oxygen.
Yeah. And all these seats are crazy. There's a zombie man.
Yeah, they almost all die in the first scene on the ship.
Yeah.
Of like, and they have to get into the suits, and then you find out the suits are the bad guys. I mean, that whole thing. That's one of those ideas that really the execution of this episode, you have to give it so much credit, because I think the suits being the villains is an interesting idea on paper, but how it's actualized is everything.
Yeah.
Because the way they do it of like dead bodies in suits that are moving of their own free will and just want to kill you, and the whole thing of that Bill gets a malfunctioning one.
Yeah.
Boy, it puts you in this sense of like, how's the Doctor going to get out of this? We've seen him in similar situations a million times, but I really genuinely don't know because, the TARDIS is behind this airlock and Bill is in this malfunctioning suit and there's all these things coming to kill them and they have nothing to fight them with and the Doctor breaks his sonic almost immediately.
Yeah.
Like, they really ratchet up the tension so quick in this episode. It's like, as kind of scary as Knock Knock was, it was kind of a warm-up for this week.
Yeah, and it's something that again that I think people should go watch the J.B. Matheson interview on YouTube because he talks specifically about that one of the first things he does when he's writing an episode of Doctor Who is try to basically get rid of everything that can help the Doctor and just be like, I'm just gonna like destroy the Sonic immediately, like just like destroy everything, like take away all the oxygen, like take away everything, and how the fuck does he get out of it? And this is like, I like that the whole episode feels like it's kind of about like he can't always just get out of it fine, like it did. You take everything away from the Doctor, and sometimes he can't perfectly solve these kinds of problems, and normally that just leads to other people dying. But like in this episode, it also leads to like really personal, physical consequences for him, and that like really raises the stakes of the episode.
Yeah, he literally all he has is his intellect.
Yeah,
and it's considerable. It's enough to get them out of it, but it's not enough to get them out of it unscathed.
Yeah,
most of the team they meet dies. Bill is. She's going to have PTSD from this.
Yeah.
She's going to be very scarred by this whole experience, even though she technically comes out okay in the end. And the Doctor's blind.
Yeah.
And, I really... I mean, we can talk more about that decision, but I really do think this episode would not be as powerful if it ended with the Deus Ex Machina.
Yeah.
Oh, he's fine now. Because that would just be... That would prove the Doctor right in some ways about his arrogance here.
Yeah.
That, oh yeah, I can just go to the TARDIS and there's a magic wand and I can fix it. And what it makes it in the episode that actually aired is a giant bluff, kind of.
Yeah.
Of that, no, he's not a magician. He can do a lot of incredible things. He can't just magically cure blindness.
Yeah, exactly. And that feels so much more sort of germane to the show that it feels like, of course the Doctor can't. Like he can't cure blindness in the same way that he can't like bring dead people back to life. Like he's not. That's something that like the TARDIS is almost never used for, is as some sort of like medical station that heals people. Like every once in a while, like yeah, he has like some first aid stuff, but he doesn't. He's the Doctor, but he's not a medical doctor. Like that's not. He's said that very emphatically at different points over the course of the series, and I like that this. Yeah, the way that the episode comes out is that it's like, no, like, of course he can't just fix blindness. Like, that's not something he's ever done. That's not something he's ever shown to be able to do to heal people in that way. Like, he heals people in metaphorical ways, not in literal ones.
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's those moments where he's saying to Bill, basically just to try to make her feel okay about everything.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, no, don't worry. We get back to the TARDIS, I'll be fine. And if the ending of the episode was that he gets back to the TARDIS and he's fine, then those moments kind of don't have any depth to them. And I'm sure that's part of why Stephen Moffat would look at a script like this and be like, yeah, we have to keep him blind, because otherwise, that makes the Doctor less interesting.
Yeah.
If it's the Doctor basically just giving platitudes so everyone will be calm enough to get out of this, that's a character dynamic, you know? That's this level of kind of concealment that's actually really interesting. And it's easy to kind of jump to the end, but because the end is not this perfect tie a bow on it, it really strengthens the rest of the episode.
Yeah.
Because there's no easy answers to what happens in it.
Yeah. So then, like, one thing I want to talk about is going back to, like, the capitalism in space and how political this episode gets, which is something that I feel like Doctor Who normally doesn't do. And when it does do it, it tends not to do it in this kind of, like, you know, fighting everyone on a space station kind of episode. There tend to be like, you know, this is like a weird version of Earth or something like that is where it tends to get more political. And here it's like, it's full on like alien style, like, yeah, there's a monster on the station, but that's not what is like the real evil force that is, or like quote unquote evil force that is manipulating things, that is really killing people. It is this sense of, you know, late capitalism, of this like really abstract sort of system that has put all these people in a situation where it is most cost effective for them to die. And like, that's what it is. And like, that is how business works in some ways, especially when you look at like all these characters are, you know, they're basically space miners, you know, they're the coal miners of space. Like, they're completely dispensable. They don't provide anything hugely of value to the rest of the universe. Like, you just can, like, they mine their shit. When they don't mine their shit as efficiently as you want them to, you just kill them and get some new people. It's like, that's it. And there's something about that and how much they keep it in the abstract, and have that the Doctor have that great line at the end where he's basically like, you're fighting a spreadsheet. Like, there's not the one character like in Aliens of the dude who's around that's like, oh, this is just the smarmy corporate jackass dude who's just like a complete, like, amoral fucking monster that represents the evils of capitalism. It's like, because no one person ever embodies that shit. It's just this big abstract thing that has decided it's better for you to die, and there's no way for you to, like, really fight against it.
Yeah, so it's like this episode has two layers of faceless villains, you know? In that there's the suits, which are pretty much literally there are faces, but they're dead.
Yeah.
And then you have, fighting a spreadsheet is a brilliant line. And, you know, this episode hammers home its political point in just how little they get out of this. You know, that the Doctor and Bill live, and two people on the ship live, but no one's really okay. They haven't fixed the system at the end. You know, there's so much that is broken. It really feels like the Doctor and Bill in this episode flew into the dark inverse of Star Trek.
Yes.
Where something I've always said about Star Trek is that for the world of Star Trek to exist, the only way that future could happen is if we moved into that kind of socialist utopia, post-capitalist world, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And there's even, you know, Patrick Stewart, who we mentioned earlier, has that beautiful monologue in Star Trek First Contact where he's trying to explain to this Earth woman from the time of the First Contact, like, well, how would you ever build something like this? And he said, well, we realized, you know, there's more than money, and we didn't do this because we were making profit, and blah, blah, blah. It's a really great scene, and it kind of, I think, is a really great espousing of kind of the very optimistic, very idealistic view of Star Trek. But of course, there's the dark inverse of that. That if capitalism didn't go unchecked and just, or you know, didn't get checked at some point in history, and it went on, of course that would be an end result of capitalism. That already is an end result of capitalism in our world. It just doesn't happen in space.
Yeah, but like the thing that it does, that this episode does so well, is I feel like it gets that point across of like, in a lot of ways, space makes it worse, because when you think about how completely remote these people are, how like cut off they are from everything else, they don't have communications with Earth. They're not like, you know, you can't just easily access these people on this like asteroid mining platform. So they can all die and nobody knows about it. The way that like 200 to 300 years ago, like all of your miners in this coal mine fucking like in another country, they could all die and their families in Britain would have no idea. It's just like, you get a letter from them like once every 3 months or something, whenever like the fastest way it can get there. You'd have no idea for the longest time that like, oh yeah, no, Dad's dead. Like he just died in this fucking mining collapse because, you know, the company thought it was too expensive to put in like proper like struts or something to support the shaft. You know, like that's how that works. And this just makes it so clear that it's like, there's no reason that this company can't, other than like moral reasons, which, they don't give a fuck. There's no reason that the company can't just kill all these people because there's not going to be any real repercussions. Nobody's ever going to find out.
Yeah, the remove of science fiction allows you to get to the heart of some of these issues, and this is one of those episodes that really uses that, I think, to its fullest potential.
Yeah.
And, Doctor Who has been a little more political this year.
Yeah.
And it does, like a lot of art airing on TV and in games and stuff at the moment, there's a lot of this that is entering into a world that is already kind of radically different than the one it was probably written in.
Yeah.
Of course, you know what I'm talking about with the rise of fascism in America and other places.
Yes.
And just, you can't help but think of it in some of those contexts of like, yeah, this is like the future that would come out of like an unchecked, Trump-esque presidency, or something where like you just deregulate everything and then we go to space.
Yes.
Shit like that. So, yeah, and I think we're heightened to notice it, but even then this is, as you say, specially political for Doctor Who.
Because also, one of the major mechanics of the whole plot of the episode is that this company is literally selling these people the oxygen that they are breathing, which I think is a really good idea, because it's like, there's no,
it's a serious version of the plot of Spaceballs.
Basically, it's just like, but when you think about it, it's like, why wouldn't...
Right, no.
Unless there's some sort of government regulation that would prevent private companies from doing that, they would fucking do that, because you have to buy food, you have to buy water, you have to buy shelter.
It's absolutely no more ridiculous than being charged for water on planet Earth.
Exactly.
And we only think about that because that's the status quo we live in. But it's you need it to live just as much as you need oxygen.
Yeah.
And oxygen no one can charge you for here on Earth, although we'll see what happens in China someday.
Yeah, sure.
But in space, there is none of it. Of course you'll be charged for it. And it is like, the whole thing of like the suit they're being charged for, the oxygen, but it's their job. It's a nightmare scenario before you add in the death and the horror and all that other stuff.
And it's like, for me, what really gets me is just how sort of plausible the whole concept is of like, the system has been so rigged against these people that like, to be able to perform their normal job, they have to fucking buy this suit that is actually owned and like controlled by the company that regulates the oxygen that they can breathe, that they have to pay for the oxygen, but they need all of that stuff to do the fucking job they need to do, but they're also, all the money they're getting is going to paying for the stuff they need to do the job they're doing, to get the money to pay for the stuff they need to do the job. And like, it's just this cycle that keeps them stuck here until they become unproductive. And then you just kill them and ship in some new fuckers.
Yeah, it's scary.
Yeah, it's a really good.
And again, I want to shout out again to the production design of this episode, because the design of the interior of the spaceship, again, that's a set Doctor Who designers have had to make hundreds of times.
Literally since the 60s.
Yeah, literally since the 60s. And they have often done a great job. Doctor Who has always had imaginative sets and stuff. Sometimes it's limited by budget and whatnot. But it's, the TARDIS has always looked cool, for instance.
Yeah.
But like, this one, I thought they did such a good job of kind of drawing out what you're talking about in the script of like kind of the psychological isolation that these people are in, and just kind of the abject, that they are just, basically pieces in a machine.
Yeah.
And that ship just looks so sad. It looks so dirty. It looks so lonely. Like, it looks like the space equivalent of a dirty mine without the safety requirements. And so there's just this sense as they move through those spaces that space itself within the ship is isolating, and it is harmful, and it is scary on its own.
Yeah.
And I love all of that. It's, this is not... you have like the haunted house in Knock Knock, and that's just kind of having fun with like, how do we make a fun kind of British haunted house?
Yeah.
This is even, I think, a layer deeper than that of like, the thing is not necessarily built to be scary, it's built to be utilitarian, and it's horrifying in its own way.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that I think is just, and then the design of like the costume design of the suits and everything. And Pearl Mackie probably did not have a fun time shooting this episode.
Sure, yeah.
Because she has to be in weird positions for a lot of it.
Yeah, like where the suit just gets stuck with her arms like out in a T-pose and stuff like that.
Yeah, and we've praised Peter Capaldi. We'll be talking about him more in a minute.
Yeah.
Worth noting, like, Pearl Mackie has to go to some places in this episode. She does not get to smile a lot during it. That could not be fun for like, a week or two of shooting, however long they take to shoot one of these, to be in that kind of heightened emotional duress. Yeah. And she's so good.
Mm-hmm. Because this is like the episode where she has to be the one that's like, she is so afraid for her life this whole time, because it's like so clear, she's probably just going to die, and she basically does die at the end of the episode, and then like but like all these sort of half dies or whatever.
Yeah.
And she hasn't had to, she's had to be afraid in the different episodes and stuff like that, but not in like the grips of this sort of mortal terror. That's like, it's kind of rare for companions to have an episode that's that intense about it anyways, but especially like for a companion that's like, it's this early for her.
The range she has had to show in 5 hours of Doctor Who is kind of incredible. And I don't think, for me personally, like through Modern Who, where I know all of those companions pretty well, I don't think a companion has ever come on in Modern Who and been this well established in 5 episodes.
Yeah.
Maybe Amy Pond, but to a different degree, because that was a very different kind of relationship, and she and the Doctor were being defined in tandem with one another, which is what makes that relationship so interesting. But like this is something where like she does not feel like she's been the companion for 5 episodes.
No.
She feels like she's been the companion for much longer, and that's a really weird like feeling. I don't know how to describe it even. But like you get that, I think the best like filmed scene in the episode is when the airlock is about to open, she's trying to put the helmet on, and then the suit goes haywire and she has to take the helmet off.
Yeah.
And just like the way that is shot with this like very disorienting, like it's got filters and stuff on it, and then it's edited where it just becomes very, very disorienting as it goes along. And
she's, because she's exposed to the vacuum of space, so she's like slowly asphyxiating.
Yeah.
And that's where like it comes in with that really brilliant setup at the top of the episode where the Doctor, it sets up the Star Trek stuff you're talking about, where the Doctor has the space is the final frontier.
Oh, right, yeah.
Speech at the very beginning. So it's like the show is very conscious of the Star Trek connection, but also he has the whole lecture talking about this is what happens when you're exposed to the vacuum of space, kids. That is like the more like scientifically accurate version of that. So when you get to this point of the episode where she's exposed to the vacuum of space for like a minute or something, you're very well aware of like, right, she's not just asphyxiating, like there's the temperature, there's the pressure concerns, like this is very, very bad for the human body.
They set you up to be very afraid of it.
Yeah. In a way that's not just like, oh, you're going to freeze or you're going to suffocate. It's like, no, all the shit that happens to you when you're exposed to like the pure vacuum of space is so fucked up on the human body.
Right. And then the other things in that scene are just the sound effects and the music. Murray Gold is so much this show's Swiss Army knife in that he can apparently do anything musically they ask of him, and I think this is another standout episode for him of kind of helping to guide that tone along.
Yeah.
But that whole scene is just such a nightmare incarnate. And I actually kind of have to praise BBC America for a moment for their commercial placement, because they had the balls to put it when the screen goes to black.
Oh, jeez.
And that works. That, like, there is something about that is like, I watched it DVR'd, so I fast-forwarded through the commercials, but it's still like, if you watch the BBC version, it would just be, it goes to black and then it comes back up.
Yeah.
There's something about having to wait even like 30 seconds while you're fast-forwarding that is so psychologically manipulative. I can just imagine like a couple of interns at BBC America putting the commercials in, being like, should I put it here? That's too much. Wait until after should I do this? Should I do this? And it's just, because you can imagine you could put it anywhere else you wanted, but I just think that's kind of brilliant that they chose that moment, because it's actually a clean cut to do it on, which they very rarely have on Doctor Who, but it definitely added to the tension of that moment for me, of like, I need to get to the next scene.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, so good on them for that. But anyway, so you have that, you come back, the Doctor is blinded. Yeah. And it's like a good half the episode that he is. And Peter Capaldi has to kind of find a new way to kind of express the physicality of the Doctor.
Yeah.
Because, I think all Doctor performances are pretty big in terms of their performance. But Peter Capaldi is much less gesticulating than Matt Smith or David Tennant.
Yeah.
And it was kind of interesting, when he's blind, he does that a little more. And you kind of see shades of like a 10 and 11 in there,
Yeah, where like he needs to express himself physically in different ways now because he can't see.
So he's bringing back his gesticulating skills from past lives. And but it's interesting. It's so much, I don't want to say the word fun, but it is so interesting to see the Doctor in that mode and have to figure out kind of how to navigate all of this. Bill, of course, just has to feel even worse about it. And like, they just keep ratcheting up the tension, because it's like 5 minutes after that then her suit gets stuck and the Doctor's like, all right, I'm going to have to let you die, basically. And he's like, I promise you'll be okay. But we're like, what does he mean? Is it a bluff? Are they really just going to kill the companion 5 episodes in? Because at this point, anything could happen.
I mean, they have Nardole as a backup companion, so who knows? Like, maybe that was the plan all along.
Yeah, and
the darkest season of Doctor Who fucking ever.
It really would. But then, they get into that last room, and the Doctor's whole plan that he executes at the end, and I, of course, love the moment where he's like, just get me to a keyboard, and I'll do it. And he does this where he links their suits into the system that if they die, the whole ship will blow. It is. It's the only way you can beat the spreadsheet, as he says.
Yeah, it's to make you too expensive to be killed.
Yeah, it's... And what's so fascinating about that is, again, all he actually gets at the end of this episode is him, Bill, Nardole, and these two other people off.
Yeah.
He doesn't save anyone else's lives. He doesn't take down the company. He doesn't blow up the ship. None of this. He just gets them to a stalemate, essentially. And he's still blind, and Bill is still scarred, and all this stuff. And so you get sort of the big, doctor is really smart, triumphant moment at the end. But when you step back and think about it, and I think the episode very much asks you to step back and think about it, it's not that triumphant.
Yeah.
All things considered, Yeah,
because it's also just that whole scene I love so much of him sort of like creating this plan, and he has the sort of bluff that he's doing of like telling these people, no, like, we're just going to die because I can't figure out anything else. We're just going to blow this thing up, and like that's the best we can do is
good
say
death.
Fuck these people. Is like die a good death, which is a callback to the girl who died, because there's a whole line, like series of lines in that discussing about like, what is a good death, because that's the episode with the Vikings and stuff, and so the Vikings want to die a good death, and the doctor says like there's no such thing. And so I think it's a good callback and is enough of sort of a tip of the hat to the viewer to be like, yeah, of course the doctor, that's not really what he's going to do. But Peter Capaldi is so flustered and like, kind of like completely out of his fucking mind in that scene that there are moments where, even though I know in my head there's no way that's how this episode ends or anything like that, you kind of think like maybe he is just gonna fucking blow everyone up. Like maybe he's just at that point where he's like, fuck it, man. Like this is so just, I've gone so far, this is so bad. Like, because you don't also get a lot of sort of like internal perspective on how the doctor feels about having been blinded. So it's like you don't know how far that's affecting his decision making, or like has him like being exposed to the vacuum of space, maybe more had happened to him than just being blind. And so that whole sequence is like the most, in some ways, like flustered and just like completely lost in some ways I've ever felt the doctor in one of those scenes where he's just, you kind of don't always have faith that like his plan, if he has a like bigger plan behind this stuff, is like real or is going to work in any way.
He feels genuinely unpredictable in that moment.
Yeah.
And as wonderful and unpredictable as the character of the Doctor can be over the years, in those kind of like coded archetypal moments, how often can you say the Doctor is genuinely unpredictable?
Yeah.
You really can't, and Peter Capaldi can play that.
Yes.
He can play that very well, and it's great. So you have the final scenes where they're on the TARDIS. I feel like we haven't gotten a good scene like that where he brings some guests onto the TARDIS briefly, and I liked the resolution to those character stories. Like the guests on this episode aren't super fleshed out, but I thought they worked very well for what they are.
Yeah, me too.
And then we have the final scenes at the school, and I just want to get your thoughts on this. Like, what was your thought after the magic over the eyes, and then because Capaldi plays it very delicately of is or isn't he blind, and you can tell around Bill he's being a little guarded. He's got his eyes open. He looks okay, but I think in any viewer's mind you've got to be asking, is he? And then of course you have the whole thing with Nardole, which I think is a great ending scene.
Yeah.
Because Nardole has every right to be saying what he's saying to the Doctor, and the Doctor knows he's right, and of course it ends with the final line of "I'm still blind," etc. But what was your kind of thinking as we were watching that scene unfold?
I mean, yeah, it was something where I didn't really think that he was going to still be blind, just because, again, like, that's something that literally Doctor Who has never done. Like, they have never had the Doctor be physically maimed across a whole episode. Like, that's just ridiculous. Because, I mean, it's Doctor Who is a inherently sort of like episodic sort of thing, so you don't think of having a like really character impacting, like physically character impacting decision made in one episode that is going to like linger over into other episodes that completely change how those episodes are going to be written. So it's like I didn't think that was going to happen, but there is like enough of that performance, and especially when you see him in the sonic sunglasses in the office, you're like, is he really actually fucking still blind? Like, are they actually going to do that? And when he does do it, like, I feel like it is such a, as someone who's a huge Doctor Who fan who's like seen it all the way through, that's such an insane mic drop moment, because it's like, it is very rare for Doctor Who to be able to say that they've done something that they have literally never done before. Like, you can have, like, we did this, but we did it in a different way or whatever, which is how, a lot of, like, the Bill companion stuff has worked out. It's like, it's not like we've never seen this kind of episode, but it's, like, a very different perspective on it, and that's a lot of fun. But this is, like, literally never. They have never done this in at least mainline Doctor Who. I don't know about, like, there might be some weird, like, Doctor Who magazine short story from 1998 or something that does this. But as far as TV, like mainline canonical Doctor Who goes, this has never been done.
Yeah, and you're right. Like the closest you can think is like this feels like a regeneration story.
Yeah.
But it's not. He's going to regenerate later this year, but this is not that.
Yeah, this is halfway through the season.
Right. So it automatically feels very different. You know, like it almost feels like this could be a Caves of Androzani-esque regeneration story if they wanted to go with it. But again, that's not what they're doing.
Yeah.
So now the question becomes, we get to play the speculation game. And I think it's actually an interesting one to play this time.
Yes.
Of how long does this continue? Because here's the thing. If you go back and look at the next episode previews and stuff for Oxygen, all the scenes where he was blind, they had Capaldi's normal eyes in the previews, so you don't know. They kept it a secret. There are still, like, if you go back to, like, the Series 10 trailer, because I immediately went back and was like, what scenes haven't we seen yet? And I'm looking at them, and his eyes are normal, but they tricked us once. Does this continue until his regeneration?
Yeah.
Is this fixed in the Moffat episode that's coming next week? Is this part of a bigger plan because he is regenerating? And I think at this point we can pretty safely say they were writing towards this. I think Capaldi announced it later, but it really does feel so far like Series 10 as written as something of a swan song.
Yeah.
So where do you think they're going with this?
Yeah, like it's hard. It's impossible to tell, obviously, because I think there's like really two directions you can go. It's either like the blindness thing lingers for at least the next episode and maybe gets resolved at the end of the next episode, and like maybe he finds some way to regenerate his blindness, or like maybe the next episode after that is where that happens, because it's also like it's very clear that we are like heading to the point where it's like in the next couple of episodes for sure the Master is going to come out of that vault, and like that's going to be a thing that's like that we're going to have to deal with, because that's another thing about the ending is it very clearly Nardole sets up the stakes of like, yeah, if the Master or whoever is in the vault finds out that you're gone or finds out that you have been injured in some way, like what is going to happen? You're not at your best. You're vulnerable. And then it's like, I actually am very vulnerable because I am still blind. And it's that. So that sort of sets up an interesting dynamic for that kind of like whatever the main series arc is going to be with that. But then the question is, does it get resolved at some point in the middle of this season, or is he going to be blind for the rest of the season? Which would be an insane thing to do. Especially just from a logistical perspective, to then go to like all of your writers in the back half of the season, because Stephen Moffat only has like the next episode and like the last episode, so it's like it has to go to all these other writers and say, oh, by the way, the Doctor's going to be blind in your episodes. Like that's a huge thing to ask those writers to do, but it's something that I have always sort of in like my imagination thought of like different like weird like Doctor Who scenarios of different sort of like regenerations that the Doctor Who could do. Like one I've always imagined would be kind of interesting is if in the middle of a 2-part story, the Doctor regenerates in the middle, and so like the new Doctor has to solve the problem that killed the last Doctor in his first story. I've always thought that would be a really interesting one to do. And another one I always imagined would be like, this would be a fucked up but amazing thing to do, would be instead of it being like, 1 episode or 2 episodes, the Doctor like fights this giant crisis and then at the end is like sort of physically harmed in some way and is forced to regenerate, is if over the course of the season, the Doctor's just slowly accumulating injuries and like poison and all this stuff. Because that was some of like the fan theories for older regenerations that were not always like kind of like explicit about why the Doctor regenerated. Is you look at certain scenes, you're like, well, maybe he didn't fully recover from being poisoned in this episode and getting shot in this episode or whatever. And like, it's this accumulation of stuff that leads to regeneration. If that is what they're doing, I think it'd be really dark. It'd be really interesting to see the Doctor have to sort of like, for whatever reason, like kind of keep himself from regenerating and really slowly trudge through the next like 6-7 episodes of this season, physically harmed and like accumulating other sort of impairments that then like eventually sort of culminate in him having like he has to regenerate. Yeah, like instead of it just being like this race and hitting the finish line and regenerating, he like limps across the finish line to finally regenerate.
Yeah, I think the answer is somewhere in everything you just said.
Yeah,
because you're right. It would be utterly insane to have him blind for the rest of the season, but I can see them doing it.
Yeah,
It would also be utterly insane to do everything they did in the back half of season 9 2 years ago, but they did it. Mm-hmm. So we know these guys are insane enough to try it. So that's one thing. But I can also see the scenario you're talking about where maybe the regeneration starts in some way next week.
Yeah.
And it's going to take 7 episodes to finish. Or, as you say, it's the injuries start accumulating or something, and he starts limping over the finish line. It really does feel like... And, Peter Capaldi has kind of indicated this in interviews that they didn't want this to just be the traditional oh god, I got shot, boom,
Yeah.
goodbye, regeneration. And I can see Capaldi's performance being so good, Moffat and company so clearly enjoying giving this guy challenges, that whatever happens with the end of his run, they're going in a really, really different direction, I think.
Yeah.
And that's an exciting idea.
Yeah, I feel like it's pretty rare for this show to like drop something on me where I'm like, oh, I have absolutely no idea what to expect from this at all, and it's really exciting to have them just like play this card that I've never seen this show play before.
And we're only 5 episodes in.
Yeah.
Next week will be the halfway point, but then we've got a whole half of the season left.
Yeah, it is because like you would expect if there was going to be an episode like Oxygen, it would be the like episode before the final two-parter of the season. You know,
right?
That's where you'd normally expect that kind of episode to be placed, with how like desperate and intense it is. And here it's just like, nope, yeah, it's episode 5,
and that's why it works in some part is because just from our knowledge, we've seen many seasons of Doctor Who. Even if you just limit it to modern with like the 12 episode runs, this is the 10th time we've done this. We know what an episode 5 feels like.
Yeah,
this doesn't feel like an episode 5, even though it sets itself up kind of to feel like an episode 5. By the end, it's not. And then we know, all right, next week we got Stephen Moffat to write. We've got the Pope or something.
Yeah, some weird like Vatican something is going on.
Yeah, so fascinating.
Yeah.
I am excited.
I am so excited to see where the season goes.
Because we are 5 for 5
Yes,
so far.
absolutely, yeah. It is an incredible batting rate for Doctor Who over the past couple of years, for sure.
Yeah, and, I think we both kind of thought Series 9 was so great and singular that even if Series 10 was great, it would just kind of have to be a step down in some ways. And it really hasn't been. It's a very different season. It's a very different kind of good. But boy, is it great.
Yeah.
So far. I'm so excited to keep talking about it.
Yes.
Yeah. So we'll talk about more Doctor Who next week.
Yeah.